All right, good morning and welcome to Compass. Hey, if you were asleep before that video, I hope you're awake now. That brought some energy. If you are a first-time guest, so glad you're with us. Want to make sure to say hello to our Facebook Live audience. Thank you for checking in as well. I love it that football is back now because it takes the pressure off so many of you guys because you don't have to worry about what to wear. You just grab your jersey and you are good to go. So great to have you here. Welcome to our 10 o'clock service. We're starting new service times. We're jumping into a new series in just a moment. If you have your Bible and you like to follow along, we'll be in Psalm 77. Let me say this before we jump in. We will deal with some heavy topics today. One that is particularly close to home for me, dealing with disappointment and even in some ways depression. I just want you to hear. We'll tell some stories and talk, but if you need prayer, in any way, we want to make sure you can come and pray with myself or one of our pastors, one of our team after service. Thursday nights, once a month on Thursday nights, we do an extended time of prayer and worship after the service. And those are such great times that you can come help us pray for others or let us pray for you. And I really want to encourage you this Thursday, we're doing another one. Come and just spend some time and let us pray together. Those are so good for your soul and just so good for centering you. And they're so healthy. So I hope you will consider coming being with us on Thursday night as well. But hey, it's just your well-being. Totally up to you. With that, not funny? All right, whatever. I don't care. So we are kicking off a brand new series today, talking about how to get a breakthrough, okay, in some areas of your life that may be trying to break you, right? So some barriers that may be trying to hold you back or hold you down that are meant to be broken. And listen, you and I, we love it whenever people break through some barrier that was previously unbroken. So we put a man on the moon, or right, we looked at the civil rights movement and fighting for justice in ways that maybe we hadn't, or even breaking the 4-minute mile, right? We love when those things happen. And then after that initial barrier gets broken, then seeing lots of other people have the freedom and ability to maybe break through some things like that as well. Okay, well, today we're gonna help some of us break through the disappointment, right? Or maybe depression or maybe deep discouragement that has you maybe all shook up, maybe even on the path to being down and being out. And for sure, life is totally full of disappointments. We all face those. You've probably heard the saying, right? The only thing certain in life is death and taxes. Okay, well, I would argue that I'm pretty confident that we all have dreams, right? Every one of us have some sort of dream, and some of those dreams do get broken, and then you have to deal with some level of disappointment, okay? Kind of like this guy right here.
You're my sweetie pie, you're my cutie pie, you're my shono, you're my everything, and I know you find this cheesy, but I want everyone to know you make me really happy. And I have a little poem for you, and I'd like everyone to hear this. When you smile, the whole world stops and stares for a while, and my heart ceases to beat, and there's nothing else that I seek except you. And I just have one question for you. Jana, please, I need to. You truly make me the happiest person on earth.
Are you okay? I really thought it was sweet.
Clearly, he should have proposed to her because she thought it was sweet. He picked the wrong lady. And there's no recovering from that, right? Did you love his poem he wrote for her? When you smile, the whole world stops and stares for a while. I think that was Bruno Mars. But nice try, dude. All right, so listen, and we can joke, right? And we can have some fun. But reality is, for some of us, life has not lived up to our expectations, maybe in an incredible or an increasingly painful way. And maybe you're dealing with disappointment, right? And maybe even spiraling into an unhealthy or a dangerous place. So we want to talk about that. And so we're going to look at some Psalms throughout this series because first, the Psalms are just so shockingly honest and they're so real. Like I would argue that one of the reasons that the Psalms are in the Bible is to teach you and I how to express raw, unedited, unfiltered disappointment or fear or hurt or confusion to God, right? Because it seems, right? It would seem from the Psalms, since God included those in the Bible, that he doesn't just want nice, safe, tame, sanitized prayers, right? But that he invites us to be honest and to be authentic and to say what is on our hearts, right? Which sometimes involves, maybe raising your voice a little bit or saying words that you probably shouldn't repeat in public, okay? Because sometimes, man, you've just had enough and it all comes to a boil and you just unload, okay? And God doesn't freak out when you do that. In fact, I would say God embraces that as part of our journey and the process to getting a breakthrough in our lives, to getting a breakthrough in the disappointment. And maybe you're new to church, or maybe you've been around church for a long time and you're thinking, I don't know about that, Pastor. Do you have a verse? I do have a verse, and we're going to read through this psalm together, and I'm going to show you how God creates space, right? And even gives permission, listen, people, it's in the Bible, to express your frustration with Him, with life, with what is going on. Then I'm going to also show you another story of how God engages us in that and give you some takeaways for how to come out of or kind of break through the disappointment, the discouragement, maybe the depression that you are walking through. So we're going to go now and look at this Psalm 77, written by a guy named Asaph, who is just in a season of extreme disappointment, right? Apparently he's really frustrated and feels like God is unresponsive to, right? He's ignoring or not recognizing his pain and his disappointment and his hurt. And so he's going to let God know. We'll pick it up. Verse 1, here's what he writes. He says, I cry out to God. Yes, I shout, oh, that God would listen to me. When I was in deep trouble, I searched for the Lord. All night long, I prayed with hands lifted towards heaven, but my soul was not comforted. I think of God and I moan, right? So again, deeply frustrated here, and he's honest, overwhelmed with longing for his help. So first, Asaph doesn't tell us why it is that he is disappointed right now. So we don't know if it's some tragic or painful loss. He found out about some life-threatening illness. He's dealing with bankruptcy, got demoted, right, or got passed over for the promotion once again. If his spouse, his wife walked out on him, like we don't know, right? What we do know is he's apparently crushed by whatever disappointment is he's dealing with. Goes on, verse 4, you don't let me sleep, right? Which actually, that's not God. That's the anxiety. That's the frustration. That's, the feeling of a loss of control. But he's venting and he's frustrated with God. And so God can handle that, right? He's a big boy. We go on to read, I am too distressed to even pray. I think of the good old days long since ended. So he can't imagine a day right now when the sun will come out tomorrow. When my nights were filled with joyful songs, I search my soul and I ponder the difference now. Has the Lord rejected me forever? Will he never again be kind to me? Is his unfailing love gone forever? Have his promises permanently failed? Has God forgotten how to be gracious? Has he slammed the door on his compassion? Right? So do you feel the absolute devastation and just the weight of the emotion that he's carrying? Right? So he's in a dark place. It is heavy, which maybe some of you, you can completely identify. Maybe you've even been in that season. Or if we could read your mind or see into your heart right now, maybe that's where you're currently at. So this is what he's feeling. Goes on in verse 10. I said, this is my fate. The Most High has turned his hand against me. So he's just he's throwing in the towel, right? Just totally defeated. Maybe even ready to take some more extreme measure. So he's turned his hand against me, but then watch this. Watch what happens, verse 11. You kind of have this transition moment. But then I recall all you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about your mighty works. Oh God, your ways are holy. Is there any God as mighty as you? You are the God of great wonders. which you should say, what? Like he has seriously changed his tune, has he not? Okay, so how does this happen, right? Because I do not assume that it happens quite as quickly as you and I read it. Like it probably didn't happen that immediately, but he's come to a place where he's able to remember and to celebrate and to find hope in what God has done. All right, so how does he get there, right? And what is it that he does to get this breakthrough in his life? And what can you and I do to break through maybe the disappointment, discouragement that is holding us down and bring us back to a place of excitement and joy and hope again? Well, we don't know for sure, right, from the story. We don't know what process that Asaph took to get there. But again, I want to show you another story, right? And another guy who is also in this just season of extreme disappointment and give you some intensely practical steps that God has taken with him. And here's what I want us to see as we do this, that instead of letting our circumstances, right, the disappointment, define God's love for us, we would let God's love for us define how we see and how we view and respond to our circumstances, which I would say that's the place that Asaph got to as he ends the psalm and starting in verse 11. And that's my hope, desire, goal for you and I as we talk through this. So now there's another guy named Elijah that went through a similar season. Maybe you know about Elijah, maybe you've not heard the story of Elijah. So he's in 1 Kings 19. He's also in a really dark place and he's kind of spiraling into unhealth. Elijah, like if you were with us for Jonah, he's a prophet of God, which means just this. He's got this unique job description that he speaks on behalf of God to God's people. But he's doing this at a time when when God's people, they are really off track and they are a total and complete mess, okay? So they're being led by a guy named Ahab, who is not good, right? He's evil, he's not a good king. And then his wife, Jezebel, who's even worse, right? Like nobody names their child Jezebel for a reason, right? Any of you have a friend named Jezebel? Do you let your kids go play with the Jezebel? You don't, do you? If they have a play date, you should cancel, right? Bad move. Jezebel, here's how I picture her. She's kind of like, Disney's new Maleficent without the horns and wings. That's kind of her. Ahab and Jezebel have brought in false teachers, false priests, these false religions into the country. And so Elijah feels like he's up against the world, right? Like the entire nation trying to speak on behalf of God. And then if you know the story, there's this epic moment where they have a major showdown between Elijah, over 800 of these false prophets. God shows up, God does this incredible work, and he gets this great victory. To which Elijah's probably thinking, yes, sweet, everything is going to change. This is so good now. Now things are going to be different. And they're not, and it doesn't change. In fact, he gets back to town, back to the main city, and Jezebel has already issued this decree or this threat, basically that by this time tomorrow, right within the next 24 hours, she is going to have him killed. To which he should respond, bring it on, right? Like what time and where? Because he just saw God do this incredible work, bring down fire from heaven, consume 800 plus of these false teachers and these altars. That should hold you, right, for at least a day or two. But it doesn't, right? And he's completely disappointed and he's frustrated with God and the situation and everything that's going on. And like Asaph, he's beginning to spiral into this really dark, unhealthy place. And so I want us to see how God engages him and what he does to kind of lead him to a breakthrough. So let's go look at the story. 1 Kings 19, we'll pick it up in verse 3. You heard the backdrop, so here's where we're at. Elijah was afraid and he fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Watch this. Then he went alone into the wilderness. So pay attention to those words. We'll come back, alone and in the wilderness. Traveling all day, he sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. Which, hello, have you ever been there? Just worn out, just tired and exhausted, where you're like, I can't even go on, right? Like, God, just end it now. And again, he has just seen this incredible move of God, and he's like, whatever, man. Like, I'm just done. Either send Jesus or take me home now. So this is where he's at. Goes on into verse 4. I have had enough, Lord, he said. That word enough there means it's too long, right? Like it's too abundant. Like this is just too much stuff. So he says, take my life again, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. So again, he's just venting, man. He's just completely crushed by this feeling of disappointment. To which I want to talk about this. Think through this. Elijah is a person of great faith, right? Like there are moments, if you were to go and read about his life, you would think, whoa, like this guy has got it going on, right? He walks with God, talks with God. He is tight with God. To which I would say that would suggest that even the most spiritually mature person can struggle, right? And become discouraged and just be overwhelmed, which is why I would say it is not helpful when someone's struggling, right? When someone's having a hard season, struggling with anxiety, just feeling overwhelmed, whatever. When we say things oftentimes in the faith community like, well, if you were just right with God, then you would be okay, right? Okay, so then on top of the pain that you're dealing with, now you have to deal with guilt and shame as well. To which I would say, no, listen, even the most spiritually mature people can find themselves in situations similar to Elijah where they're going, I'm done, God, like let's just end it. Right? Like honestly, how many of you could say that even in the recent past, you've thought, I've had enough, man, with the situation at work or with the boss or the financial strain or whatever, enough already. And I would say, man, like I hope you never have that moment where you feel like you can't even take one more step. But I do sense that probably more of us will feel like that at some point than we like to admit and like to acknowledge. So what do we do, right? What do we do when we feel like we've had enough? Well, I want us to learn a few things from Elijah and from Asaph. And the first thing we learn, if you like to take notes, I would encourage you to do this. Just admit it, right? Simply admit when you've had enough. Both of these guys, they get very honest, right? And they get very real with God and they just lay it out there where they're going, here's where I'm at, God, and I don't like it because it is too much, right? And confession is really good for your soul. And again, God can handle that. He's not freaking out whenever you say that. It's not like he didn't know. So many times, right? Sometimes just saying stuff out loud, right? To God, to a safe friend, right? You want the lightning rod. You don't want the friend that's going to take whatever it is you say and just amplify it and feed it and create more bitterness or more freaking out or more stress. You want the lightning rod, the person will say, okay, I hear that. You're upset, you're stressed, you're whining. Are we good? Or, just absorb that and then move on. But saying those things, writing it down is so good for the soul. So many people that struggle with depression, being disappointed, alone, find that some of the hold and some of the grip that it has on their life begins to crack and begins to give way just by talking about it, right? Honestly, with God or with someone that you love and that is a trusted friend. Because most of us, you have financial hardships, or you have relational hardships, or at your place of work, difficulty and stress, just life in general, man, where you need like the label on your chest that says, warning, contents under pressure, right? Like you got the little red line and the needle is hitting it hard. Some of you are there, and you and I, we need a way to let the pressure valve off. And sometimes just saying it, like both of these guys did, is such a huge pressure release, right? You get it off your chest, to which I would argue that is part of the journey to breakthrough, where you're going, God, I don't know why this is happening, and I don't know how these things keep going on, but it is enough, man. Like I'm done. I'm completely tapped out. And again, God doesn't mind that. And I would say you're probably going to feel better. Even if nothing changes, you change. And even if nothing is different, maybe you're kind of like, I feel a little different, right? You just get it off your chest. Like, I needed to say that. So that's where they start, right? And again, Elijah has had enough at this point, but God's okay with that. God's not frustrated with him. God is still working on him. Let me show you a couple other takeaways to help us work through and disappointment and get a breakthrough. Verse 5, then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. He looked around And there beside his head was some baked bread on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again, man, right? He just went back to sleep. Have you ever been there? Where you're like, I'm grabbing a bagel and some bacon and going back to bed, right? That's where he is. The angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. So he got up and he ate and he drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. There he came to a cave where he spent the night. All right, so this is such an interesting story, is it not? Because Jezebel wants to kill Elijah, right? Elijah is afraid to die. He runs off, but then he asks God to take his life, right? Basically, he doesn't even really have the energy at this point to face the next challenge that may come in his life, right? And maybe some of you're in that similar season where you feel like you can't even take one more thing. Right, I can't take one more hit, one more issue, one more thing coming at me. So let me look at this and give you the next takeaway. Here's what you need to do. Replenish, right? Replenish your soul and yourself. So first you admit, next replenish. So think about this. There's a lot that we could say about this text. For sure, Elijah's disappointed. He's kind of down in the dumps. He's feeling this. But do you notice what it is he does? He goes and he takes a nap, right? He goes to sleep. The angel comes along, wakes him up, like, hey, buddy, I brought you some breakfast. He's like, awesome, cool, thanks. And then what? Goes right back to sleep, which, by the way, I think that is awesome, right? I don't know about you. I would love that command. Hey, get up and eat something, drink something, and then go back to sleep. Yes, please, right? And listen, whenever you're dealing with disappointment, right, being discouraged, one of the wisest things that you can for sure do is to take care of your physical and your basic needs, right? Sometimes you just really need a good night's sleep, right? We just need sleep. It tells us here, Elijah went and he took a nap. Maybe, right? Maybe for you, the most spiritual thing that you could possibly do this week is take a nap, right? And just tell people, right? Like the pastor told me to. Now, don't be judging me. I'm just trying to follow God's word and be obedient. I'm taking a nap. See you later, right? Elijah does. He gets some rest. And this is so incredibly powerful because research would show, right? Just go check out the research. We are a sleep-deprived nation, right? And how many of you have noticed that whenever you're just worn out, exhausted, like all of a sudden, everything in life looks worse? It does, right? And you see this with your kids, right? Whenever they're little, how many of you had the kids that when they started to get tired, they had certain behaviors? Like mine would start to talk a lot, just talk. And you knew they were about to crash when they're just talking. Like at the dinner table, it's late and just boom, like Zeke would just fall asleep in his plate sometimes. Or they get to that moment where they just go over the edge and you can't talk sense to them at all, where you're like, man, buddy, I think you're really tired. You should probably head upstairs and go to sleep. I'll come tuck you in. He's like, oh, no, I can't. I am too tired to go to bed, Daddy. Like, what? Okay, adults, we do this too, right? Where we're like, oh, man, it's bad. Work is bad. The boss is bad. This is bad. This thing over here is bad. I'm bad. The kids are bad. The dog's bad. It's all bad. Then you go to bed and you get a good night's sleep and you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh, you know what? I was wrong. It's good, right? I think things are going to be good. And nothing has really changed for you except you got a good night's sleep. And it really is so powerful. Do not underestimate or miss this. So I heard about a blogger that a while back, he did this experiment where he went without screens, right? Like your screen on your computer, your phone, and without electric light whenever it got dark, right? So this is what he did for he and his family. And they just, whenever the sun went down, it was dark, right? And then whenever the sun came up, they lived and they were just guided by the sunlight. And they were just gonna see what would happen, okay? So then he does this experiment and then he blogged about it. And he said, here's some of the things that he discovered. He said, first of all, he noticed that his family got much quieter whenever the sun went down, right? Which was way earlier than they would typically have gotten quiet. Then he said this as well. He said at first, initially, they were sleeping on average 11 hours a night, right? That's where they started at 11. He said then after a while, after they did that, it kind of leveled out right around 8 full hours of sleep each night. But he said, listen, they were well rested 8 hours, and we needed that time to catch up. Then he said this. He said, across the board, right, across his family, my kids, myself, my spouse, our mood was much better and more consistent. And then he said, he found that we were having more moments of fun and laughter and silliness just randomly by getting enough sleep, all right? So listen, don't miss this. Elijah is burned out. He's exhausted, which for sure that will fuel, right, your disappointment and discouragement. It'll fuel those things. And one of the most spiritual things you can do in those moments is make sure you're getting sleep, right? So he sleeps and he goes back to sleep. He eats and he takes care of himself. So God's going, hey, why don't you get some food, eat some stuff? Why don't you get some sleep? Because then you'll catch this. He said, I'm getting you ready for the next step of the journey. And sometimes even in the disappointment, God is getting you ready for the next phase or what's coming next. To which I would say, if you're rattled right now, feeling discouraged, overwhelmed, are you eating well? Are you sleeping, right? Are you getting exercise? I would say get to bed on time, get up on time, go and accomplish something, right? Anything, go accomplish some stuff, surround yourself by people that will speak life into you. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Just taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, it's so powerful, right? Because God has plans for you. And Elijah's feeling like he's done, but God's not done with him. Go back and look at verse 8. We read this. So he gives him food, right? He's gonna let him sleep, gives him some food, lets him sleep again, more food, because the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days. He's gonna need strength, watch, to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. So this is interesting. Mount Sinai, so first, that's the mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments. If you know the Exodus story, that's the same mountain. It would have taken Elijah about 10 days, right? 10 days from where he is currently at to get to Mount Sinai. Okay, we just read the verse. How many days did it actually take for him to get there as God's leading him? How many? 40, right? So God is taking Elijah on the scenic route, okay? How many of you in here, have you ever taken the scenic route? Right, ladies, you're like, yes, with my husband, every time he drives and doesn't ask for directions. I know. Okay, so when you're dealing with disappointment, don't miss this. A lot of times, God is not interrupting your plan, but God is fulfilling the plan as he takes you the long way around. So don't lose heart, right? God might be doing a work inside of you. And we saw a minute ago that word wilderness. Okay, so he's in the wilderness traveling these 40 days. Wilderness has such powerful imagery in God's word, okay? So wilderness, a lot of times, is the very place where God does his greatest work inside of you, right? Where he's trying to get you ready or grow you or reveal some things. So the wilderness is where you become more humble, right? The wilderness is where you become more unselfish. It's where you learn to love more and better and not judge a book by its cover. The wilderness, it's also the place God often deals with an attitude in you or an unhealth or something that needs addressed, which, by the way, is never fun. Just so you know, like when you discipline your kids, never fun, but hopefully a better man or a better woman emerges on the other side of that. One that is filled with more compassion and more love and more grace and more strength and perseverance and goodness. God could have, for sure, delivered Elijah to his destination in 10 days, right? Not gonna be a problem. He can totally do that. But instead, God's going, hey, buddy, we're gonna take the long way around because I have some work to do in you. To which I would say, how about you, right? I mean, honestly, how are you doing? Do you feel like you're wandering right now in the wilderness, not sure what's going on, and like tempted to look at your circumstances, to look at the disappointment you're going through, and maybe to try to define your life by those things? Or you're going, why am I still single? Why am I still married, right? Some of you, why? Why do my kids not ever listen to me or do what it is that I ask them to do? So you feel, right, in the season like you're wandering around in the wilderness as a parent or just as an individual or person, whatever. Why will the business not take off? Why is this thing not working out? What is it not getting handled? Why do I have to keep going through this? Why does this keep happening? And again, I want to encourage you to not let the circumstances and disappointment define God's love for you, but instead you would let God's love for you define how you process and how you engage and view the disappointment or the circumstance. And again, listen. I fully understand that you may still not understand why you're in the situation that you're in, but at least it will help you to step back and say, okay, listen, God, I don't know why it is that you and I are walking through the wilderness right now, but teach me the lesson that you want me to learn so that I will be ready for the next step or the next season or the next thing you're preparing me for. Because here's what we do believe, right? The story of the Bible, that on the other side of that wilderness is the promised land. And we hold out for that and we hang on to that. And then a couple of things as we wrap this up, close with this. Back in verse 9, we read this. But the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He's like, I don't know, God. You brought me here. I'm waiting for you to tell me why I'm here. So what are you doing here? Then in verse 18, we read this. God tells him, yet I will preserve 7,000 others in Israel who have never bowed down to Baal, right? These false images or kissed him. So a couple closing thoughts. Number one, God says, why are you here? You know what this is? You know what he's doing there? This is God's way of going, remember. That's the next thing you need to know. So first we admit, we replenish, remember, right? God's saying, remember why, remember who you are, remember whose you are. Do you know how you got here? Do you know what I've done for you, how I've provided for you in your journey up to this point? I've not abandoned you in the past, and I'm not going to abandon you now. I've not deserted you in the past. I'm not going to desert you now. I have not let you down in the past. I'm not letting you down now. Right? And this is what Asaph did, I would argue, right? Asaph, in the end of his psalm, where he recalls the goodness of God and he remembers the wonder and the work of God's hand in the past, and it really helps him turn the corner to get a breakthrough. To which I would say, when we don't know what God is currently doing, remember what God has done, right? Always lean back into what he's done. I've had seasons where I have to look back and say, here's where you were faithful, here's where you took care of our marriage, here's where you provided, remember what he's done. And then here's the other thing. One of Elijah's biggest problems in this entire scene, in this entire narrative here, is that he believes and he thought that he was all alone, right? That's what he's convinced himself. All alone, all by himself. Like when he went into the cave, he gets to the cave and he's like, oh God, it's just me, right? Only me, I'm all alone. I'm the only one following you. I'm the only one being faithful. And now I have to suffer all by myself. And God's going, no, you don't, right? Would you not love this about God? Because it is so easy to convince ourselves that nobody understands the pain, the disappointment, the problem, the hurt, whatever it is we're going through. And God's going, listen, no, you don't. And the only reason you think that is because you're actually physically all alone right now, like you've isolated yourself. Notice this, okay? If you know the story, God does not give Elijah total breakthrough while he's in the cave, right? He takes him, they go to the cave, he's working on him. He doesn't get complete breakthrough there, but he sends him out of the cave to go and pursue his purpose, to live out his intention with all these other people, right? That we just identified in verse 18, that have been waiting on him the entire time. So let me encourage you this as you break through the disappointment. We need each other, right? Meaning, I can't do this alone. You cannot do this alone. Life is for sure going to be filled with disappointment and discouragement and hard seasons. I don't just want community, right? I need community. Because here, I cannot achieve God's purpose for my life by myself, right? I'll be constantly disappointed, discouraged, struggling. We need each other. And if your dreams can be accomplished by yourself, those are not God's dreams for you because it's way too small. And sometimes God turns our life upside down so that the me becomes the we. So admit, right? Just sometimes say it, say it. And then replenish. Do not overlook just the basic physical needs you've got to pay attention to. Remember, and then connect. And there's ways you can do that. We've got ways you can get plugged in, go to a Discover Compass, get plugged into a group, help out and serve. We want to help you do life with others that can encourage, right? And even in some ways help you remember where God's been good. And if you would like prayer again, come find us after. We want to pray and encourage you. Come on Thursday night. We would love to pray with you. I love you guys. Let me pray and we'll wrap it up. Heavenly Father, you are such a good God. But we know that disappointment and discouragement and hard seasons are real. And I pray for those feeling alone right now, feeling discouraged, ready to just throw in the towel, who in some ways have decided I've had enough, and maybe even considering more extreme measures in a relationship, in a work context, or in life. That they would see, God, you're God that's there for them, and maybe even in the wilderness and maybe scenarios that we didn't want or didn't create, but you'll still redeem that. And that they have friends and family and people who are here for them, and that we would lean in, God, and that you would do a redemptive work. And for those that just need you in relationship with Christ to have our greater hope, that today they would make that choice and surrender. God, we thank you for loving us, and we pray this in your Son's name. Amen.